Quran burnings in Denmark and Sweden. They're causing both secular Nordic countries problems at home and abroad, with Denmark now proposing a ban on burning all holy books, as Copenhagen found a way to respect freedom of speech while ensuring security and foreign relations. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the Quran burning protests. Well, Denmark is moving to criminalize the public burning of holy books after a string of public desecrations of the Quran. The Justice Minister says the burnings are aimed at sowing discord and hatred, with the government's proposed law motivated by security concerns. Now, Swedish intelligence services have also raised concerns over security implications, but the government says it will uphold commitments to the freedom of public expression. So what is the most effective way to stop the incitement of hatred by far-right agitators? And could Denmark's bill deepen political divisions in one of the world's most secular countries?
A series of Quran burnings have focused international attention on Denmark and Sweden. The incidents have caused diplomatic crisis, prompted a UN resolution on religious hate, and sparked mass outrage across the Muslim world. Thousands have protested in Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, and Turkey, demanding action to stop such acts. Now, the Danish government is presenting a bill that would criminalize the desecration of the Quran.
The government will therefore bring forward a bill which prohibits inappropriate treatment of objects of great significance for a religious community. And the bill will thus make it punishable if, for example, you publicly burn the Quran, the Bible, or the Torah. And the bill will only aim at actions that are carried out in a public place or with the intention of spreading it in a wider circle.
The legislation has been prompted by security concerns, with threats increasing following the Quran burning incidents.
It's about feeling safe and secure as a Dane. For freedom of expression, it must have a very broad framework in Denmark. It is an absolutely fundamental value for our country, for our democracy. But it comes with a responsibility. There are no freedoms in this world without a responsibility.
But Danish opposition lawmakers say the government is abandoning Denmark's fundamental values. Nationalist Danish People's Party spokesperson Mette Thiesen called the bill scary and devastating, and said it means the reintroduction of a blasphemy law, which was scrapped in 2017. The Liberal Alliance Party posted a picture on social media saying congratulations, Al-Qaeda and co, and wrote sad day for the Danes, good day for the extremists. Sweden is facing similar problems. Its embassy in Baghdad was stormed and set on fire over a planned Quran burning by Salwan Momika in July. And terror groups Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and Al-Shabaab have urged retribution. And those threats have led to the Swedish security service raising the terror alert to high last month.
Och du leder ett land som uppfattas som islamfientligt i stora delar av världen. Vad tänker du om det?
It's basically a completely inaccurate picture, but what we in Sweden must now do is take the threat seriously, and we must equip ourselves in various ways to be able to meet them, to detect people who are preparing crimes, to stop such crimes that are about to happen, but also to correct incorrect perceptions around the world about what kind of country Sweden is.
The government is now reviewing the country's Public Order Act. According to the current law, the police can reject a public gathering if there's a risk of a war or an immediate security threat. An inquiry will assess if the law could be applied to stop Quran burnings. But the Prime Minister has ruled out introducing a blasphemy law.
Sweden is and will continue to be a country with freedom of religion, but also with the right to criticize religion, even in a way that a believer may perceive as offensive.
Sweden plans to finish its review before July next year. It's unclear when Denmark's bill will come before the parliament.
Well, this past weekend, Swedish police actually arrested and detained people trying to stop anti-Islamic firebrand Salwan Momika from burning a copy of the Muslim holy book. The incident took place in a public square in the southern city of Malmö, which has a large immigrant population. The Iraqi immigrant has previously burned copies of the Quran outside a mosque in Stockholm during Eid al-Adha, as well as outside the Iraqi and Iranian embassies, as well as the Swedish parliament. So let's debate where Denmark's proposed law may be going, as well as Sweden's position in all of this. Joining me now from London is Ahammed Hussain. He is the spokesperson of the Muslim Public Affairs Committee UK. Omar Makram joins us from Stockholm. He's a Swedish-Egyptian public speaker, podcaster, and columnist. And completing our panel is Farid Hafez from Williamstown, Massachusetts. He's a visiting professor of international studies at Williams College and researcher at Georgetown's The Bridge Initiative. Thanks all so much for being with me. Omar, I'll start with you. You know, Sweden will be closely watching Denmark and its legislation to ban this desecration of sacred books. First, do you think Denmark is on the right track here? Is this possibly the least controversial way to tackle this?
No, I don't think Denmark is on the right track at all, because this is in practice reinstitution of some sort of blasphemy law, something which belongs in the Middle Ages, frankly. And I hope Sweden, and I don't think Sweden would follow suit in the same way.
Is it a blasphemy law, though, really, or just managing what many consider to be hate speech?
Well, they are basically trying to make religious objects immune to desecration. That is, instituting some kind of like holy status to certain objects, and that is what blasphemy law is. It is some sort of blasphemy law.
Okay, Farid Hafez.
Well, my take on this whole issue, honestly, I don't have like a clear-cut opinion on the question of if such a blasphemy law should be reinstituted or not. Because obviously one can understand, from the European history and from the strong position of the church that the societies want to free themselves from these restrictions on the one hand. But on the other hand, there is obviously this whole, and I would not look at this whole issue from the perspective of religion and blasphemy law, but rather from racism. Because obviously the group that is affected by the Quran burning is not a powerful group like the church, right? Where it might be even a sign of bravery, to burn the book of those who are in power. But in this case, it is the book of an already marginalized, racialized minority. So I think the context in which, this whole debate takes place is just kind of a very different one. In contrast, to talking about blasphemy law against the powerful.
Fair enough. Ahammed, what do you make of this? And, my initial question being, do you think this is a good first step for Denmark, or are you on the same page as this is actually just bringing back even antiquated blasphemy laws, rather than a form of what some say, again, is controlling hate speech?
Yeah, I think calling it a blasphemy law, even like linking it to blasphemy laws, it kind of hijacks the conversation, and in a very lazy way, because it's convenient to call it a blasphemy law because, it's to do with the religious community, etc., etc. But it's not about blasphemy. And Denmark, the centre-right government in Denmark frames it very, very logically. This is a conversation or a mode of conversation which isn't helping anyone. Burning Qurans on the street, burning Qurans in front of mosques, burning Qurans in front of Muslim communities. It's not furthering any critical dialogue. When I say critical, I mean it in both sense of the words. Critical in terms of being, adversarial, being pushing forward with different modes of thinking, and critical in terms of what is needed right now. Burning Qurans doesn't help anyone move any discussions forward. So in terms of how Denmark has been framing their new law, it's in a very pragmatic way. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't help further anything except raise security threats. And this is something that advocates, leaders, analysts have been pointing out since, these situations have been going on for years now. It doesn't help social cohesion. And finally, what Denmark is doing is taking on its responsibility of being, responsible towards its citizens. No government should be trying to increase security risks at absolutely no payoff. It doesn't help anyone, except, as I've said on your show on previous appearances, except from a political goal scoring kind of angle, where you have right wing, far right, xenophobic, Islamophobic parties who need to show that their new, different manifestos and platforms have something valuable to bring. Unfortunately, they've fallen on their faces. And by enabling and allowing and voicing Islamophobia and xenophobia, mud on their face, it hasn't helped anyone improve any situations in either country.
So if you find this to be pragmatic, Ahammed, do you think it will pass?
In Denmark, it's already passed. And in Sweden, we've already got the justice minister saying that, look, there's a way of adding it to the public order law without any need to amend the constitution. Honestly, the way I see it is that it's more about the internal political maneuvering in this new right-wing coalition, which has only come in recently. It's the internal political maneuvering that is slowing things down. A poll by Sifo, the Swedish polling company, already showed that over half the population of respondents, a poll that took over 1,000 surveys. More than 50% of the Swedish population is willing to ban Quran burnings, and there's already a way there, as the justice minister said, that we could bring this into law. So where there's a will, there's a way. The real question is, why is there not yet political will? And again, I would say it's purely political. It's nothing deeper than that. It's nothing from the Muslims in terms of an ideology or a community that's slowing things down.
Okay, Omar, I mean, some solid arguments put forward there, and Ahammed seems to think that the same will likely be done in Sweden. Will you protest if it does?
The thing is, it's also important to point out that the ones who are increasing the security risks are the extremists who are willing to meet freedom of speech with violence. It's not freedom of speech that's increasing the security risk. And it's also important to point out that even if Muslims or minority groups in the West, most Muslim majority countries do not allow criticism of Islam. They do not allow satirizing Islam. They wouldn't allow Muhammad cartoons, for example. So the only way to actually satirize or ridicule Islam, if for those who want to do this, is in the West. They cannot do it any other way. So that's also another thing. But it's also important to point out that the government and the justice minister, they did not say that there is a way to do it. They said that there will be a committee that will look into the possibility of doing that. So that's not a done deal at all. And even that does not have support a majority in the parliament. So I think it's, as things are right now, it would not pass.
Okay, Ahammed, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look at it this way, and again, it goes back to what I said before, where there's a will, there's a way. The question is, why is there no political will? If there was some mad nutter who went out in front of the Ukraine embassy, started burning Ukraine flags and copies of the Ukrainian constitution, is that freedom of expression? Or is that someone who has an opinion which is not conducive to the public good, which is not conducive to public discourse? Sure, just take the Islam, the Quran, the Muslim aspect out of the argument and look at it on a completely, on a completely basic level. Is this mode of communication, literally, we're talking about burning the Quran. When you look at the legislation that Denmark has brought through, they specifically mentioned, look, satirical modes of communication, cartoons, etc., that's not the case here. That's not within the remit of the law that they want to bring in. And in terms of international responses, in terms of what goes on in this country versus that country, that is a whole separate argument, and that can be made, yes. But in terms of specifically, should the Quran be burned? Why is Denmark banning the burning of the Quran? Denmark has made a very pragmatic case. Sweden, why are they dragging their feet? Where there's a will, there's a way. Why isn't there a will? And it has to be said that it's not convenient for the current right-wing coalition in power, which has been, the Sweden Democrats, which had a cordon sanitaire up until 2021, are now welcomed in. And now it looks like the kind of xenophobic, Islamophobic ideology, which is one of the foundation points of their entire party, and this is now a major party in the current coalition. It's very, very awkward for them. And so what people have to realize is that the Swedish voters need to realize is that they have their opportunity, their voice to be heard. We're talking about freedom of expression here. And if Swedish people feel that the behavior of the government is not reflecting their opinions, now is the time to voice their opinion.
Okay. Let me get Omar. We'll take your response. Farid, I'm going to come to you in just a second. Omar, go ahead.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's also important to. It's true that that around 50% or a bit more than that in opinion polls that the Swedish people want to ban Quran burning. But it's also important to note why that is. The narrative here in Sweden has been from even political party, from debaters and so on, that there is an increased security risk. So this is happening out of fear. People in Sweden and political parties are afraid of terrorist attacks. It's not that they think it is wrong in itself, really. They are afraid of the consequences. And this is bound to increase fear and suspicion towards Muslims and not the other way around.
Okay, let me come to Farid quickly because I'd like to talk more about what has actually gotten Denmark to this point of, exploring laws to deal with this. Is there perhaps just too much at stake now in both business and foreign policy? Or are people also fed up with, the kind of, I guess, hate, I'll use the word again, that's being peddled by these, I think it's fair to call sometimes these fringe elements in societies that do this?
Well, yes, absolutely. I fully agree. And I think, in terms of understanding the reasons of why Denmark is taking these steps, it's clearly about foreign policy considerations, right? I mean, I'm sure that the political elite in Denmark, they are still remembering the days of 2005, 2006, when you had around the Jyllands-Posten newspaper publication of the cartoons on Prophet Muhammad, an international crisis, right? There were a lot of Muslim clergymen, Muslim leaders of states that boycotted Denmark. And I think this is really, something that Danish politicians have to think about. Like, what are the implications of not allowing it or allowing it for our foreign policy and specifically for our economic interests? On the other side, I also feel that, to an extent, I'm a little bit worried that, this whole Quran burning debate is really also distracting us from the real problems of institutionalized Islamophobia. I mean, Denmark is one of the countries that has implemented the so-called ghetto laws. When we speak about Muslims in Denmark, we have about 35% of people with the so-called migration background who have no citizenship rights, who cannot vote. So it's a very much a very small minority of people who have not the ability to participate to a full extent in their societies compared to other minorities. So they have a lot of structural problems that they are facing. And, in the face of all of these structural societal problems, we are discussing, these very symbolic aspects, which are problematic, from different perspectives. And obviously, when the Jewish community comes up and says, well, you cannot ever burn any holy scripture because this is a sign of hate crime. There is a point to that too, right? Because there is this history also. That is one part of the European history of burning holy scriptures, that you burn scriptures before you burn people. And it's not that I'm implying that this would be the next step that happens, but there is a reason why to be,
it's a logical argument, though. Yeah, Omar, I mean, let me put that to you then, because you do seem to consider the history. You're saying we're going back, if we're going backwards, you call these blasphemy laws because you feel we're supposed to have made progress from history, but we have to consider our reality today just in real time. And there are those like you who argue that you are rewarding terrorists or extremists by changing the laws. But another issue is how much is it worth really sacrificing actual security for people, and not least of diplomats, both at home and overseas?
Yeah, but this is like this is about, in principle, giving up the liberal democracy for the sake of fear of terrorism. Because it does not really, this is a slippery slope, it does not really stop at burning the Quran. Like there has been already...
Don't we have to be realistic about certain threats and what might antagonize unnecessarily? Because there are just different realities in different places. And you're putting, for example, diplomats in foreign countries at risk. I know it seems unfair to have to cater, as you might say it, to these extremist elements in other countries, but that is their reality. And therefore, the security of... Go ahead.
Yeah, but that does not mean that we have to basically cater to these threats and start to enforce some sort of blasphemy law. Like mosques here in Sweden have been asked about what they would like to do. There was 31 out of 32 mosques that wanted to ban Quran burning, but they did not want to stop there. They wanted to ban, for example, Muhammad cartoons and any kind of disrespect towards Islam. So this is a very dangerous thing. If we show terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, who are threatening Sweden right now because of the Quran burning, other terrorist states like Iran, who are basically saying that Sweden is in war with Muslims and so on. If we show them that we are willing to compromise, we're willing to ban Quran burning in response to this threat, what is the next step?
Let me ask you then about Farid's comparison with, if you burn a Torah, for example, it immediately invokes very difficult past that Europeans have had to reconcile. That's not allowed, and that would be considered hate speech, and it would be protected. The minority that would be affected by it would be protected. Why should that not apply to a minority Muslim community?
Burning the Torah is allowed in Sweden. It's not illegal. You can burn the Torah, you can burn the Bible, you can burn any religious book. And this is coming back to equal rights. So Muslims, Jews, Christians, and so on, they have to have equal treatment. So if the Jews and the Christians are okay with or at least not threatening to respond with violence towards burning their holy books, Muslims should not be doing that either.
Okay, let me, Ahammed, go ahead. Or Farid, then Ahammed. Farid, go ahead quickly.
Yeah, like a very short comment. I mean, I think it's absolutely right. Legally speaking, it is allowed. But I think, the political repercussions would be very different. Mm-hmm. And I think this is something, the larger picture about that we have to talk about. Why are we at a state where, the Quran of the burning becomes, a regular act on behalf of a couple of, more right-wing folks, but it speaks to a larger sentiment that is out there in the society and that is also upheld by the power elites. And I think this is really the question that is at the heart of this problem that we are currently discussing here. While something might be legally okay, it's still, the societal reactions of those in power, if somebody comes up and burns the Torah in the front of the synagogue, would be most probably very different to the reaction that we see in terms of burning the holy book of Muslims in front of the Turkish embassy or the mosque.
Okay, Ahammed, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got several points. So firstly, in terms of Bibles and Torahs being legal, it's legally permissible to burn those as well. A few months ago, there was a Muslim guy who filled out the paperwork to demonstrate, I think it was in front of the Israel embassy, to burn a Torah and a Bible. And then it was a publicity stunt. He wanted to demonstrate that legality and morality are not two in the same thing. And he refused to burn a Bible and Quran, Bible and Torah, because he wants to show that Muslims have respect for other people's scripture. Second point is that, look, an act of terror has already been committed. Going up to a Muslim's mosque, neighborhood, whatever, burning a Quran in front of them, in case you can't understand and get your head around it, imagine someone's burning a picture of your mother in front of you. The Quran to Muslims is something that helps us define ourselves, that helps us give us a sense of purpose, a sense of aspiration, a sense of hope through our dark times, and a reminder in our good times. The Quran is important to Muslims. That is a fact. a photo of your mother is important to you. That is a fact. If someone's coming up to you and deliberately burning something that is important to you, that is already an act of terror. An act of terror has been committed. Someone is trying to terrify you. Someone is trying to say to you that what's important to you, and maybe even your own life, I'm going to disrespect it right in front of you. These acts of terror have already happened in the eyes and in the hearts of many Muslims in Sweden. And thirdly, what good has come from these years of Quran burnings in Sweden and Denmark? What good has come of it? Has there been a more nuanced discussion around the compatibility of Islamic values and Nordic values? Has there been more discussion around this, that, or the other? Has there been a better understanding of those who disagree and those who agree?
Okay.
Has burning Qurans helped that? If not, it makes pragmatic sense to not carry on with this stupid, painful act of social discord.
Okay, that unfortunately, Omar, I'm sorry I can't get back to you. That will have to be the final word for this edition of The Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us. Our viewers, of course, for watching as well. You can follow us on X, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.